All right, well, it happened. I guess it was kind of inevitable since I've been getting a ton of messages from people with EGR valve issues, DEF related issues. These trucks do have some issues right out of the factory, it appears, and you either have a good one or you don't. And if you don't, you usually have it early on. And I have 7,000 miles on my truck now, so mine's not early on. And I have modified it. If you follow the channel, I've done some basic modifications to the truck. So what we need to do here is pull off that intake. And the reason why I want to pull off the intake is because when I go into the diagnostics, one of the first steps, well, let me just check this out directly. So I have my laptop right here. Right, and it's got the pulled up for the diagnostics for the p0402. I don't want to show you exactly what my screen says because it's not mine to share. However, if we go into, so we have conditions for running the DTC, we have the basic stuff in there, and scroll down. So conditions for setting, mass airflow equals not within a calibrated range for greater than 12.5 seconds. So we continue going on, and the reason why the mass airflow sensor is such a big deal on this is because when the EGR valves are open, they're actually, the system is assuming X amount of flow from the mass airflow sensor while X amount of flow from the EGR valve. So if you're getting more or less flow through the mass airflow sensor, when the EGR valve is open, then it's going to set a fault, in which this is this case. So that's why this intake is a critical piece on this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue scrolling, but so it first asks you to verify the following conditions do not exist. Air cleaner element, restricted or saturated with water. We have EGR cooler restricted. I can't check that physically. EGR valve 1 and EGR valve 2 binding or sticking, restricted, visible damage. I can't check that. Well, I guess I could check that, but I mean, all I can see is the exterior of it. I can't tell if it's binding or sticking. And I can go in further data or diagnostics with this, but we're not going to because I'm focusing on just the external of this right now. So we have exhaust system leaking, missing components, restricted or visible damage. So I'm going to go ahead and look at that to see if there's any huge dents in it or anything like that, which I haven't hit anything, so I don't think so. We have induction system leaking or restricted. So I'll visually look at that and make sure that we don't have any issues with that. Mass airflow sensor right here, contaminated or skewed. So this is why I need to pull off this intake. I'm not saying that the intake is the cause of this problem. What I'm saying is the mass airflow sensor is a critical part of the system diagnosing this. So if I have a modification done to the vehicle that may change the way that the mass airflow sensor reads, and I say may because it has a high flow filter on it, so that's going to be flowing more air through it. It is an oiled filter, so there's chance of oil being like contaminated onto the mass airflow sensor, giving it incorrect reading. There's just a whole bunch of issues that are potentially there. The diameter of the tube could be different from what the mass airflow sensor was originally calculated for. And this is why it's critical to just put this back to factory. I'm going to put the whole air intake system back on. We're going to do the intake tube in the back. We're going to do the air box. We're going to put this all back to factory, clear the code, and then I'm going to go ahead and see if the code returns. Now, if the code returns, then we know that there's an issue with the EGR valve, and then it needs to be further diagnosed. And at least we know then that it's not induced by me, and we can do proper diagnostics on it to figure out which direction we need to go with that. Now, if the code does not return at all, then we know that, you know, the intake did play an important role on that. Maybe the numbers were just so close to possibly failing that with the aftermarket intake on there, it set it just over the edge. We don't know that until we pull off the aftermarket stuff, in which case I'm going to do that right now. I got it all back to stock. Here's what we have. The factory air box. The factory air filter is back on. The factory duct in the back is on. I did stick with the PPE elbow on there because that's not going to affect it. Our main thing is that we need this mass airflow sensor reading 100% correctly. This was just an accordion style from the factory, and I didn't want to use that. I still just want to go with this. So at least now we have the paper air filter inside there. We have the factory. I should probably put this on there, huh? We'll do that after I'm done filming. But we just need, it's critical to have correct measurements coming through that mass airflow sensor. The tube diameter of the K&N could have been different sized. The depth of the mass airflow sensor could have been different from the factory. That's why we need to put our factory stuff back on, get the correct numbers flowing through it so the ECM is reading all the correct info on the basic intake inlet. Code is cleared. I'm going to drive this for a while and see if the code returns.